my name is Dr. Michelle Parinello-Cason, and I am the founder of Dayla Learning, a place for homeschooling the humanities with humanity. I want to spend a little time today telling you more about who I am and what Dayla Learning does. I want to start by telling you a little more about myself. I have a PhD in English with an emphasis in rhetoric and composition and more than 15 years of teaching experience. I have taught primarily in college classrooms, including in writing centers where I've served as a one-on-one tutor for a lot of students across different disciplines and different age groups. I've also spent 6 years as a full-time community college professor focusing on developmental writing, which is writing for students who tested in as not quite ready for college level writing. As a homeschooling mom myself, I have also taught a lot of classes in my local homeschooling community for kids of all ages, and I have focused on classes in writing, reading, philosophy, and the humanities more generally. On top of that, I have been offering online classes for homeschoolers for a couple of years now. A lot of those are high school writing classes and philosophy classes, and I've just had a lot of fun really getting to know kids all over the world as we've been exploring these ideas together. I want to tell you a little more about my teaching philosophy so you can understand how I develop these classes and what goals I have in mind when I do. There are a few key ideas that serve as the foundation for my teaching philosophy, and I want to spend some time talking about each of them. The first is that mutual respect is the most important part of a good learning environment. I don't believe that I have default respect just because I've shown up in a classroom in a position of authority as a teacher. I believe it is my responsibility to earn that respect from the learners, and I try to do that every time I interact with them by making sure that learners know we're always on the same side. I've seen antagonistic educational environments. I've even been on the receiving end of them. In these, teachers kind of set themselves up as a foe to be defeated in order to learn the material. Sometimes it's even a false illusion because there's no way that the learners can ever win. And I find these approaches to be authoritarian, outdated, and sometimes downright mean. My goal is to make it clear through my actions and my words that I want students to succeed. I want them to be able to come to me with problems and to be honest about their mistakes and choices. It is my steadfast belief that these conditions allow for the most growth and long-term success. I want students to leave my classroom feeling empowered, heard, and capable. I strive to bring that forward in every interaction we have. Another principle that guides my teaching philosophy is setting high expectations. My background as a developmental writing professor, which is another term for remedial writing, means that I saw firsthand how deflated and checked out students get when they're given tasks that are beneath their abilities. The opposite can also hold true. Students can feel overwhelmed and check out for different reasons if they're giving tasks that are too difficult for them. But I believe that if you set high expectations and then provide the supports to meet them, that you can find a middle ground that really does show students that you believe in their ability to succeed and give them the tools to do it. Setting high expectations is a sign of respect. It shows learners that I believe in their abilities to succeed and that I care about what they produce. High expectations means giving learners freedom of choice over how they approach their education, how often they show me what they learn, and what methods those take. It might mean giving them multiple options for a paper assignment and letting them pick the one that best fits their own goals. It might mean letting them design part of the class itself, including choosing some readings or choosing the assignment. It might mean giving them an open-ended project prompt and trusting them to create their own outcomes. Finally, I believe in a strengths-based approach to education. Research tells us that empty praise is at best meaningless and at worst actually harmful. Students can see through it. They know when you don't mean what you're saying and when you're just giving them empty platitudes. It also promotes extrinsic motivation that comes from outside of yourself. While research shows us that the most innovative and truly meaningful learning experiences come from intrinsic motivation, when you have the desire coming from within. So I don't want to give empty praise. At the same time, we know that not everyone is coming at every task from the same set of prior experiences or the same perspectives. We each have our own strengths and weaknesses, and too often, traditional educational models thrive on identifying and focusing on the weaknesses. My teaching philosophy definitely involves self-reflection that has students striving to identify areas for improvement, but I believe it is equally important to point out strengths and build from them. A strengths-based approach helps students students build confidence in a way that is earned and valuable. So now that you've heard a little more about where my teaching ideas come from, I want to talk specifically about how I incorporate writing into my classes. Most of my classes are writing classes in some form or another, even if they aren't specifically marketed that way, because I believe that writing is one of the clearest ways that we can explore what ideas we have and reflect back on them. So you're going to see a lot of different writing assignments in multidisciplinary classes, as well as in classes that are specifically designed to help students learn writing. I want to talk some about what ideas I have about writing that underpin all of those classes. My beliefs about writing have been formed through specific training in rhetoric and composition, and also lots and lots of experience with teaching writers of all different abilities and all different ages how they can best express themselves. So here are the principles that I use every time I create a writing class. I believe that writing is easier when you have something to say. Writing is a struggle for many learners, and too often the instinct is to back off of the content and instead focus on the form. The thinking is that by focusing solely on the rules of writing, what makes a paragraph, how should you punctuate a sentence, what needs to be capitalized, that will give learners the tools they need to move on to harder, more involved writing. We provide them with drills and tiny tasks in the hope that this work will build into a more complete set of writing tools. It may sound logical, but it's completely wrong for most learners. Drills in isolation of actual context don't work. We have study after study that show us writers don't retain grammar rules without using them in context. By not allowing writers access to full, meaningful writing assignments until they have mastered the details, we've taken all of the purpose and, in my opinion, joy out of the task. It's like telling someone that they aren't allowed to bake a cake just because they can't make a perfect rose out of icing. Writing is, first and foremost, communication. We write for the same reasons we speak. We have something to say. It is my firm belief, backed up by many experiences and studies, that writers thrive when they are given interesting context in which to write. This is why I theme my writing classes around books and encourage writers to choose classes based on their interest. If you care about what you have to say, everything else gets a lot easier. I cannot even tell you how many times a writer has turned in a rough draft and felt the need to apologize for the state it's in, often when it's in very good shape, but that's a different story. I cannot even tell you how many times a writer hasn't even turned in their rough draft at all because they didn't think it was good enough. I tell writers over and over again that there's no such thing as a bad rough draft, and I mean it. If all they give me is a sentence, I'll work with that sentence and help them come up with the next steps. If they can't get the ideas into connected thoughts and just have a page full of notes, that's what we work with. I've even had students turn in rough drafts in doodle form. Writing is a messy process. We often don't know that because we typically see finished, polished, professionally edited examples. My classes aim to tear back that curtain and show writing for the mess that it is so that writers know their process, however it starts, is a valid one. Finally, I focus on process over product. We don't expect beginning bakers to have perfectly decorated cakes, and it's usually no less delicious just because it has some flaws. We recognize that practice helps make perfect, and that praising imperfect products is how we create enough confidence to keep up the necessary practice to get to better ones. Writing is the same way. The product does matter, but as we're learning to write, the process matters more. I state this directly in my classes, and I separate out my feedback in ways that focuses on the higher order concerns like meaning, organization, and development more than lower order concerns like polishing, proofreading, and perfecting. So now you know a little more about who I am, how I approach teaching, and how I approach writing. If you have a learner who you think might do well with these kinds of classes, I want to talk to you about what I have on offer for this upcoming year. I'm offering classes in a variety of formats and links so that I think many different families will be able to find something that works for them. Let's take a closer look at the offerings from Dayla Learning for the upcoming school year. From September 2020 through May 2021, I will be offering one book each month for the C, Teen, and Tween book clubs. Sometimes they'll be for teens, sometimes for tweens. I'll give you a more detailed discussion of what I have on offer for each month in just a moment. Students will receive access to an online classroom that includes reading guides, vocabulary activities, discussion boards, and a final project or paper prompt. At the end of each month, we will have a live discussion session with a recorded video summary for those who cannot make it in person. Each session costs $10 with an optional $25 feedback add-on that provides feedback for one rough draft and one final draft of the final paper or project. These could be robust enough to be a full writing and reading curriculum if you wanted to do all of the different activities and assignments. Or they could be more casual, where you just hop in for the discussions and you have the writing prompts to discuss at home. So it's really something that you can kind of pick and choose how much you want to do to make it your own and make it fit your family's needs. As part of the book club, the first ones that I have on offer are in the teen book club for September and October of 2020. The first one is Moxie, which is a fictional book that follows the path of one quiet, well-behaved teen girl who gets fed up with the sexism in her high school. She's inspired by her mom's box of old Riot Girl gear, and she decides to start a revolution. Here We Are is a collection of essays, drawings, and poems about feminism from many different perspectives, designed specifically to be accessible to young readers. This pairing of fiction and nonfiction allows us to talk about the text across genres and draw connections in meaningful ways. The next pairing is for the tweens. We'll start with the classic, Roald Dahl's Matilda. This exploration of a girl who doesn't quite fit in, finding her own voice and power, is a traditional inspiration. A more modern-day tale is The First Rule of Punk, which features another preteen girl trying to find her own way in the world. Middle schooler Malou finds her own power through punk rock, skateboarding, and being unafraid to express who she really is. This pairing helps draw connections across generations and settings and focuses on the message of self-acceptance and individuality. In January, I'm going to offer for the Teen Book Club Malcolm Gladwell's book Tipping Point. This looks at real-life examples of how little things can add up to some very big changes. The book gives crucial practice in reading nonfiction and will include some really interesting discussions and project prompts to help teens connect to sociology and cultural studies. Back to the tweens. For February and March, there will be a pair of books that both explore what happens when the world turns upside down. Esperanza Rising follows a young Mexican girl who finds her life of privilege completely stripped away and has to adapt to an entire new way of living and seeing the world. Drowned City is a graphic novel that explores the real-life tale of Hurricane Katrina and the impact it had on the people of New Orleans. Finally, back to the teens for the last two selections, we will read two memoirs about real-life experiences of the civil rights movement. We'll start with Linda Blackman Lowry's tale of marching in the 1965 Selma Voting Rights March. Then we'll turn to Jacqueline Woodson's tale about growing up as a person of color who moved between the North and the South in the 1960s and 1970s. Together, these books weave historical events with the narrative prose of people who experienced it firsthand. In addition to these book clubs, I also have more formal classes that include assignments and grading and discussions between students and kind of start and end dates. So if you're looking for a more formal academic learning experience, some of these fall classes might be a good fit for your family. The next set of classes I want to talk about are some of my most popular. These classes use the fantastic TV show The Good Place to explore philosophy. Students receive a viewing guide each week, and then we meet together as a group to discuss the philosophical themes from the episodes. We make sure to keep it spoiler-free, so even those who are seeing it for the very first time can enjoy it. At the end, students create a project exploring one of the big philosophy questions from the class, and they get 10 minutes to present it in whatever form they want. In the past, students have created podcasts, PowerPoints, videos, paintings, speeches, or led a discussion. It's a fun, supportive environment that does not have a lot of formal assignments. It's more focused on practicing discussion and critical thinking skills. It's designed for teens 13 and up. I know I'm not supposed to pick favorites, but this is the class I'm most excited about for the fall. It's a brand new class based on Dorian Lynskey's book, 33 Revolutions Per Minute. We'll read 12 of the chapters from Lynskey's book, which looks very closely at different protest songs throughout history. Lynskey's book ends in the early 2000s, so the final project will ask writers to craft a more recent chapter of their own by picking a song, researching it, and then writing what they've learned. The class includes multiple writing assignments leading up to the big project, as well as one-on-one meeting opportunities to support writers as they work. It runs September 28th through December 20th and is designed for about ages 14 and up. One of the best tools that a writer can learn is how to research other people's points of view and truly understand them, even when they disagree. That's the skill we're working on in this pair of classes. Using the book Modern Ethics in 77 Arguments, we'll take a look at different viewpoints on the same basic topic. Writers will then craft a dissoi logoi, which is an ancient Greek term for the rhetorical act of being able to display multiple sides of an argument without letting the listener or reader know which side you take for yourself. It's an excellent foundation for debate skills and should be interesting for anyone who likes to argue. These classes are also designed for ages about 14 and up. This is the very first class I designed for high school writing for homeschoolers, and it is still one of my favorites to teach. I based it off of the same class I used for college freshmen, and in this 12-week class, learners will read the entire book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. This bestseller is a nonfiction exploration of our idea of success that completely tips it on its head. We'll write 4 multi-draft papers throughout the class, and learners will get individual video feedback on all rough drafts and written feedback on all final drafts. This is a guided class, which means there are no live meetings, but there are weekly due dates to keep learners on track. They'll be able to interact with classmates through online discussion boards. This one is designed for ages 13 and up. If any of these classes look like a good fit for your family, you can find them all offered on the C Online Classes platform. The website is here, and you can look more closely at the dates and the required assignments and what supplies are needed, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about any of these classes.